Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the induction into the International Foreign Language Honor Society, Phi Sigma Iota. We're very happy to see so many friends and family who have come to join our honorees today. And I would like to say to the honorees that you join students not only from Chestnut Hill College, but from all over the country who have excelled in the study of world languages. This honor society, Phi Sigma Iota, began almost 100 years ago in 1922, and today has over 250 in the United States, France, and Mexico. And with this induction today, it brings the number of our members up to about 90 since we started this induction 9 years ago. And we welcome last year's inductees who are now officers, members of the Honor Society, and speakers with us today. And I'd just like to tell you that if everybody that's here, not just the honorees, but if all of you that are here can encourage one other student to continue in a foreign language. Some of you are inductees, have gone very far in their language. Some of you are just beginning, you're just on the way, but we need you to encourage friends. And we hope that some of you who are here in the audience today to support our new members will become members someday, very soon. I would like to congratulate our honorees on the diversity of the languages that we represent here today. We have French, German, Russian, and Spanish, and perhaps some of you out in the audience or some of our new members know other languages as well. And I'd also like to congratulate you on the number who have studied abroad in many countries, and some of you who are going to continue to do this in the future. Those of you who are here as our guests, we hope that you also will consider studying abroad. You represent many majors and fields of study, but you will continue your studies and your careers with advantages that those who have not followed your example will not have. When you know another language, you know another world. A friend of mine once told me that the minute I stepped off the plane in Paris, I was a different person. And that's true, because I suddenly saw things as much as I could, the way the French see them, or when I was in Moscow, the way the Russians saw them, and I tried to act accordingly. From a change to a new food, to a new view on politics, I could see life from another angle. You may have already had this experience, either through travel or vicariously through the language and culture and literature that you have studied. What does it mean? There's more than one way to eat or to travel or to run society. This is a lesson that we can all learn from language, literature, and culture. Mastering the linguistic and sound structure of another language is no small feat. Those silent letters in French, those Spanish subjunctives, that German word order, those Russian endings. It requires discipline, practice, and much trial and error. It also requires imagination. Begin to put the words together, or try to interpret what somebody else said when they put the words together. Once you have a reasonable command of this jumble of sounds and letters, and you begin reading a serious work, you find more challenges. What did Voltaire, or Gabriel Garcia Marquez, or Chekhov, or Brecht mean by what they wrote? Here comes critical thinking. Whatever you do in life, you need understanding and acceptance of diversity. Learning another culture will teach you this. You need a way to earn a living. Knowing another language is a skill that sets you apart in any career. You need critical thinking. Learning another language, reading its literature, interpreting its history will teach you this. And you need beauty. Language and literature, combined with art and music, with history and drama, will bring you beauty. Congratulations for going down this road, which will lead you to a life that is more human and bring rewards that are intellectual, practical, and spiritual. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad you came today. Tim Boland is a senior at Chestnut Hill College, was inducted into Phi Sigma Iota in 2018, and was elected student president this year. A Spanish major with a double minor in French and international business. Also, Tim is also a member of the CHC chapters of Alpha Lambda Delta and Sigma Iota Rho. Last year, he spent the fall semester in Salamanca, Spain. And before going to Spain, I had to give Tim an oral proficiency interview, which measures the speaking skill in Spanish and goes from novice to intermediate to advanced to superior, which is the highest level. Well, let me tell you, in my 200 years of teaching, I had never, ever given any student the level of superior, except for you, Tim. His writing skills are also the best. I'll always remember Tim's essays. They were impecables. Not one mistake, not even an accent. Not to mention the strength of his arguments to prove his points. Other professors, my colleagues, described him as insightful, industrious, knowledgeable, a perfectionist who always goes the extra mile to produce high-quality work. A scholar whose dedication has been a source of inspiration to all of us, to all who come in close contact with him, including his professors. But this perfection extends also to other languages. His French professors tell me that Tim's French is also outstanding. He speaks and writes without errors and interprets literature with depth and perception. You're outstanding, Tim. It has been an honor to have taught you. Besides his academic performance, Tim has been a major part of the drama club, Mask and Foil. He has played in 4 major productions. Tim's deep understanding of languages, especially grammar, has made him a great tutor of French and Spanish. He has worked at the Foreign Language Center for 3 years. I know how good Tim is as a tutor when my students come back to class understanding difficult concepts thanks to Tim's explanations. Tim is graduating in May. We congratulate him and wish him the very, very best for his future plans. It is my pleasure to introduce Tim Boland as your speaker today.
Hi, everyone. So, I just need to say that when I was inducted into Phi Sigma Iota last year, I never thought that I'd be speaking at next year's ceremony at all, so it's crazy for me to be up here speaking to you all, but it's such an honor as well, of course. And I'd just like to spend some time talking about something extremely important that happened to me last year in 2018, as you just heard, which was my study abroad experience in Salamanca, Spain. Now, prior to stepping onto a plane for the first time ever in September of last year, I was just a Spanish major who had been studying the language for almost 9 years. And I knew that going to a Spanish-speaking country was almost mandatory for me because, let's face it, there truly is no better way to learn a foreign language than to actually go to a country where everyone speaks it all the time. And, but really taking that leap and traveling to a foreign country alone and speaking Spanish pretty much all day and every day and adjusting to a new culture and almost a new world was something that I didn't even think I was capable of. And I would say I'm more of a homebody and not a very adventurous person overall, so that made it pretty difficult. And I'd say that I'm very comfortable with what I'm used to, so for me, stepping out of my comfort zone definitely requires a lot of effort. But I still knew that I absolutely had to take advantage of the opportunity while I still had it. So I submitted my study abroad application to the Global Education Office here at CHC and followed all the steps and fulfilled all the requirements, all the while just waiting for something to go wrong. I was basically looking to see how far I could get in the application process before something came up that would prevent me from going. But every problem that came up eventually resolved itself, and on September 21st, 2018, I boarded a plane and arrived at the Madrid Barajas airport in Madrid, Spain the next day, and I was in Spain. It was my first time outside of the United States ever in my life, and I was traveling alone because no other students from CHC were studying abroad last semester. So all of a sudden I was faced with all of these new experiences like navigating an airport in a foreign country on my own, taking a bus to Salamanca on my own, and basically just existing in a foreign country and all of the new experiences that come with that. And this is just a side note, but I remember that on the bus ride from Madrid to Salamanca, I was just fascinated by the Spanish landscape because I thought it looked like a desert. And later on, I was told that not all of Spain looks like that, but then that it just depends on the location, but still, it was my first time viewing the Spanish landscape, and I was just kind of taken aback by it, because I realized that I was no longer in the United States. And now I just want to take a moment to show you some pictures that I took during the experience. So here is the picture I took on the bus from Madrid to Salamanca right after I got to Spain. So I think you can kind of tell why I thought it looked like a desert. And then here is my host family, and there's me poking in from the left. And in the top right corner, you can see Maria, my host mother, and then my host father Javi is sitting right next to me. And it's actually interesting because I didn't really live with one host family per se, because my host mother Maria and my host father Javi, they actually rented out a separate apartment that they use to put up students studying in Salamanca. So I actually lived with people from all around the world. I lived with people from Japan, Italy, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia, so that was really cool. And here I am in the picture to the left. I am standing in the Plaza Mayor in Salamanca. And then there's the picture I took on the outskirts of Salamanca, right near the Rio Tormes, right there on the right, which the city of Salamanca is built on top of. And then finally, all the way to the left, that's a picture of the school I went to, Cursos Internacionales. That's inside of the school. It looks like that, really, it looks like that, which is amazing. And then in the next picture, we have the Escuelas Mayores building that was a part of the old University of Salamanca. And then to the right, I am in the Convento de San Esteban, or St. Stephen's Convent. And I won't go into detail about every aspect of my experience and all of my impressions because that would obviously take way too long, and I don't want to bore you all. But I'd just like to talk about one of the most important reasons why I went to Spain, which was to improve my Spanish. Now, my study abroad program consisted of a homestay with a family and 3 Spanish courses at the Cursos Internacionales school, which is part of the larger world-renowned University of Salamanca. The 3 courses that I took ended up being rather easy, but I did still learn a lot from my professors who were so fantastic and so incredibly nice. But as you can imagine, I also did a lot of learning outside of the classroom because my host parents did not know English, and I also did several language exchanges with native speakers studying at the University of Salamanca. But using Spanish inside and outside of the classroom every day was not super easy for me, and I'll tell you why. But just so you know something about me, as Professor Rogers just said, I am a perfectionist. And so making a mistake while speaking Spanish really bothered me while I was abroad. And generally, I'm very hard on myself because I do know what I'm capable of. Now, before I say this, I just want to let you know that I'm not trying to brag, but it is an important part of my perfectionist tendencies, and I mean, you just heard it, I guess. But here at CHC, a lot of my language professors have told me that I am good at what I do, and that I'm a good student, and that I stand out for that reason. And I'm saying that to you all because the praise that I've gotten explains one of the reasons why it really bothers me when I, make a mistake. Because in my mind, I process that praise that I get from my professors in a way that makes me feel pressure to maintain that quality of work. And I basically say to myself, I'm like, oh gosh, okay, so this is now what my professors expect from me. So now I have to make sure that I do it perfectly, that I don't make a mistake and don't disappoint them and never falter in any way. So these perfectionist tendencies are partly why making a mistake when speaking Spanish in Spain was so uncomfortable and so hard to deal with. And that struggle also had to do with the fact that I had been studying Spanish for nearly a decade at that point. So making a mistake was even harder to deal with because I thought that I should probably know the language a little better than I did. And so for me, I kind of looked at the mistakes I made while speaking as nothing but an indication of my flaws and of my problems and of my inferiority compared to people who could speak better or were more outgoing. And it was especially difficult when I was told that the words I was using in general conversation in colloquial contexts were actually too formal and they sounded a little odd. And several people told me this while I was in Spain, and even one of my professors interrupted me while I was speaking in class to tell me that. But I spoke that way because I wasn't used to using colloquial expressions. And then also, I remember that one time when my host mother, Maria, called me for dinner to tell her I'm coming, I said, voy a venir, which is more or less the literal translation of I'm coming in Spanish, but it's wrong because you don't use the verb venir, which means to come, unless you're in the actual place that you're going to. But the difference between coming and going is kind of difficult to explain, so I won't get into that. The point is, I said it wrong, and Maria corrected me, and then after that, I started saying it the correct way, which is ya voy. But that expression uses the verb that means to go in English, so it's all confusing. But anyway, I made mistakes pretty much every single day while speaking because I wasn't used to using Spanish in all those everyday situations, and I have plenty of anecdotes to tell you about that, but just for the sake of time, I will limit myself to that, what I just said. But in general, it was hard for me and almost agonizing to deal with those mistakes that I made because I just wanted to speak perfectly and I felt like I wasn't good enough. But one of the most important things that I learned in Salamanca over the course of my study abroad experience was that mistakes don't have to be an indication of our flaws or our lack of knowledge or our inferiority. And I learned that mistakes are really nothing but teachers, and that each mistake you make is actually an opportunity in disguise, because how is someone going to tell you the right way to say something if you don't say it wrong first? And this idea is especially important to keep in mind when learning foreign languages, because as we all know, as I know, and as all of you know, I'm sure, you make millions of mistakes. You make millions of mistakes. You don't ever stop making mistakes in the process of learning a foreign language. And the truth is that we have to make mistakes to learn and to improve. And I really learned this lesson in Spain as I kept making more mistakes while speaking. So I think we should change our perception of mistakes. And I think that instead of thinking of mistakes as an indication of our flaws and of what we don't know, let's think of mistakes as an indication of what we now have the chance to learn and as an opportunity. So whether or not you're learning a foreign language, I'm telling you to go out there and make mistakes, do something wrong, because that's just the most effective way to learn. And I want us all to start thinking of mistakes in a more positive way, because we truly accomplish nothing by focusing on our flaws and bringing ourselves down that way. And now I'm really trying to remind myself that it's actually okay to be wrong, and that it's okay to not do something perfectly. And because let's face it, perfectionism is really an unattainable ideal. And lastly, I just wanted to congratulate all of today's inductees, because you guys know better than anyone else how hard it is to learn a foreign language. And I think that a lot of students at CHC usually just take their 2 required language courses and then stop, but you guys have chosen to challenge yourselves and broaden your horizons by continuing to study a foreign language. And not only studying it, but excelling at it. And so I think that's really commendable, so congrats. And I'd also like to thank you all for listening and to thank the people who gave me the opportunity to speak in front of you all. It truly is an honor, so thank you.
Thank you, Tim. That was really inspiring, and I'm sure my students and the audience will remember these words. Since you, candidates, since you wish to become members of Phi Sigma Iota, I will acquaint you with our symbols, goals, and the obligations that we assume with membership of Phi Sigma Iota. We believe that peace among nations depends upon our willingness to appreciate the character, ideals, and culture of other countries. You see, after so many years here, I still make mistakes, Tim. That the careful study of foreign languages contributes to such an understanding. That the study of foreign cultures promotes deeper comprehension of other peoples. That as world citizens, we should learn about our neighbors and strive to judge their achievements objectively and fairly. And finally, that our duty compels us to inspire in others our desire to study the language, literature, and culture of our international community. Candidates, please stand. Are you willing to uphold this statement of beliefs and maintain an active interest in the objectives of our society? We are. You may be sitting now, seated. Applause. It is now my pleasure to invite Tim Bolin again, president of our chapter, to explain to you the meaning and history of the Phi Sigma Iota key and to introduce the new members. Tim?
Phi Sigma Iota was founded in 1922 at Allegheny College in Medville, Pennsylvania by Dr. Henry W. Church, faculty members of the Department of Languages and advanced students of language and literature. The key was designed in 1935 by Robert E. Dengler, professor of classics at the Pennsylvania State University, and since 1935 was the biennium of Horace's birth, Professor Dengler put an ivy wreath in the design to recall Horace's famous ode to his patron Maecenas, in which the poet wrote, "Me doctarum edere premia frontium dis miscent superis," which means, "As for me, I want the ivy, the crown of learned brows that unites me with the gods above." The pentagonal center of this star represents the languages of antiquity, the source of the modern languages we study. You are doubtless familiar with Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and Hebrew, the literary languages of classical antiquity through the Bible and the works of many famous authors. Although writers no longer compose their works in some of these tongues, they live on in today's spirit. They live on today in spirit, furnish the foundation for many modern languages, and transmit to the Western world the basis of much of our culture. Latin originally formed the foundation of our star and was symbolized by the ivy wreath, which surrounds the star on the Phi Sigma Iota key. Each of the 5 points of the star represented one of the 5 Romance languages. Today, our society represents not only the Romance languages, but all the languages of the modern world. The 5 points of the Phi Sigma Iota star are now symbolic of the many rays of learning which emanate from the world's great linguistic and literary traditions. Now, I would like to introduce the Phi Sigma Iota candidates for 2019, and if you could stand up when I call your name, that'd be great. So first we have Samantha Covey, Spanish. Alexander Gross, Spanish. Emily Carl, French. She couldn't make it today. Michael Mazurkovich, German. He also couldn't make it. Alexandra McCown, French. Gianna Pembroke, Russian. And then Thomas Repsik, French, but he is currently in France, so he'll receive her certificate when he gets back. Congratulations. It is now my pleasure to invite our Secretary of PSI, Emily Zanders, to address the French candidates.
Will the French candidate please come forward? Stand. Okay, or you can stand. Yeah, right here. This light stands for French, which displayed its force at an early date as a transforming literary language. The history of French literature abounds with internationally admired authors, whose works include poetry, comedies, tragedies, novels, autobiographies, letters, reflections, as well as social and political essays. From the Middle Ages to the 21st century, French writers and philosophers such as Pascal, Descartes, Voltaire, Rousseau, Zola, Gide, Sartre, Camus, and Sorot have expressed the beautiful told stories, sparked revolutions, redefined identities, questioned the unquestionable, defied authorities, made audiences laugh, uncovered social injustices, and dreamed of a new, just, and peaceful world. The universality of French literature is evidenced by the many writers who received Nobel Prizes, 14 of them in literature. The most recent Nobel Prize was given to Patrick Modiano in 2014. Astute readers are quickly appreciating Francophone authors, whose masterpieces speak of the beauty and suffering, the anguish, and the hope of their respective societies. Such is the case for Gabrielle Roy, Aimé Césaire, Anne Hébert, Mariam Abba, Jacques Rouman, Ousmane Sembène, Simone Chasbar, Kamar Alai, and a myriad of other magnificent literary artists. We now invite you to receive your certificate, membership card, and your key. Join the front over there. It is now my pleasure to invite Sister Mary Helen Kashuba to address the Russian candidates.
One moment, please. So I do have one more certificate actually for French, and Emma was actually in England last year, so I just want to give it to her.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're already here. Supposed to call. Will the Russian candidate please come forward? Gianna, you have become part of the great epic of Russian literature and culture, which dates back to the 12th century, the Lay of the Host of Igor. The Russian love of poetry emerges in Pushkin's wonderful lyric verses. Gogol's Overcoat laid the basis for realism, as well as compassion for the poor and downtrodden of society. Russian literature appeared on the world stage through the great 19th and 20th century writers, among them Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Pasternak's Dr. Zhivago won the Nobel Prize for Literature, as did the Gulag Archipelago by Russian emigre Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Russian scientists have produced many world-shaking discoveries. Russian dance, music, and ballet are known the world over, and many artists from Russia continue to perform at home and abroad. We now invite you to receive your certificate, membership card, and key. Congratulations. Pozdravляю. It is now my pleasure to invite our Vice President of Phi Sigma Iota, Kara Tutzner, to address the Spanish candidates.
Will the Spanish candidates please come forward? This light is for Spanish, the language of Miguel de Cervantes, whose masterpiece Don Quixote is recognized as the first modern novel of the Western world. Already in the Middle Ages, Spanish writers had produced important works of literature, such as El Cantar del Mio Cid, Juan Manuel's El Conde Lucanor, and La Celestina. Two of the most influential mystics of all times wrote in Spanish, San Juan de la Cruz and Saint Teresa of Avila. Their works appeared during the Golden Age, a period that produced a remarkable flowering of literature in the Iberian Peninsula. The same splendor of literacy production was repeated 3 centuries later in Spanish America, when the Nicaraguan poet Rubén Darío published Azul, a book that inaugurated a new era in Latin American letters. Spanish is the language of 11 Nobel Prize winners of literature, which include the Chileans Gabriela Mistral and Pablo Neruda, the Spaniards Juan Ramón Jiménez and Camilo José Cela, the Mexican Octavio Paz, the Colombian Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and more recently, the Peruvian Mario Vargas Llosa. Equally important have been the creations of Jorge Luis Borges, whose international stature is indisputable because of his influence in Western literature and philosophy. Spanish is the language of more than 570 million speakers worldwide. It is the third most commonly used language in the internet after English and Mandarin. Also, after English, it is the second most studied and used language in the world. Spanish is the language used in movies of countries whose film industries have been internationally recognized with prestigious awards. It is also the language in which some of the most beautiful songs have been written, songs and rhythms that speak in some of the mysterious ways that allow diverse races and cultures from faraway parts of the world to find each other, unite, and evolve. We now invite you to receive your certificate, membership card, and key. It is now my pleasure to invite Tim Boland to explain the meaning of the Greek letters Phi Sigma Iota.
I shall now remind you that the Greek letters Phi Sigma Iota superimposed on the 5-pointed star are the initials of our motto, Philotis Spou Idioma, which means friendship, research, and languages.
And now I'd like for you to share with us some of the previous Phi Sigma Iota members since we started up to the present time. Welcome to the family. And now, in the name of Mu Beta 250 chapter, I welcome you into Phi Sigma Iota, and all here present will offer you their personal congratulations. Thank you for coming. Please stay for some pictures, and there are refreshments back there. Thank you.